Hello, ladies. Today I will be speaking on the subject of lesbian shame. And lesbian shame is when people experience guilt or they may feel self conscious and even insecure about themselves, specifically due to their sexual orientation. And even more specifically, when it comes to lesbian sexuality. So, lesbians have often experienced lesbian shame in some form or fashion. It may be brief, it may be a few months, a few years, and some lesbians have experienced lesbian shame as long as they have lived. And I want to address it today. Where does lesbian shame derive from? It starts usually at home, like with your immediate family members. Your immediate family members would be like your parents, your grandparents, and your siblings. And for women or girls, usually the lesbian shame begins with our interactions with our mothers and our grandmothers and our sisters. And as young girls, as children, we're very impressionable. Like, you want your mother to be pleased with you. You want your mother to love you and celebrate you. You are wanting to be mommy's little girl. And the last thing you're thinking about is your mother being disappointed in you. But when your mother frowns upon you being attracted to another girl, well, that's how you find out that she's disappointed. But how do you find out what she's disappointed in? And is she disappointed in you? Well, sometimes it takes a little bit of experiences that you go through growing up in your early childhood, on up into when you become an adolescent, a teenager, and into young adulthood. So maybe under the age of 25 years of age, from like 18 to 25. These are very pivotal moments in your young adult years. And it impacts how you feel about yourself as a lesbian girl, a lesbian teenager, and a lesbian woman. And inevitably, it will affect you your entire life. So I think it's very good for us to discuss lesbian shame. I want to unpack it today. And you usually will experience something. There was some experience that happened in your life, an incident that happened in your life that let you know that, hey, mommy's not proud of you today. Mommy's upset with you. Mommy is disgruntled. And so you start putting two and two together and you start noticing a pattern. And you're like, okay, well, it seems like my mom always gets upset with me when it comes to girls. And your mother, even though you're a young girl, children are smart. We're not dumb. And girls are very smart. I mean, even it's proven scientifically that young girls advance more than young boys intellectually and mentally and emotionally, because the female sex matures much quicker than the male sex. It's just the way that we are designed. So we're always very observant. You have an intuition at a very young age. You may have never realized it, but you do. And your intuition is actually God-given. So you start picking up what your mother is putting down, because, I mean, you love your mom, and all you want to do is make your mother happy. But lately, she hasn't been happy with you. And it always seems like when it comes to girls, your mom starts tripping out. But what exactly causes your mother to become annoyed with you, or she shows her displeasure in your behavior? So you start thinking about what you're doing, because kind of like when you are a child and you end up getting into something and your mom gets angry and upset with you, and she may say your first, middle, and last name, so you know she's not playing. She means business. Usually your parent will tell you what you did wrong. For example, my upbringing was a bit different. I came from a very religious family, a Black family rooted deeply in the church, and everybody was heterosexual. Like, I was the only heterosexual girl in my family. And my mom and my dad were married, and they divorced. I ended up living with my father because my daddy, he actually had custody of me. And so my experiences were a little bit different. And I knew my mom, we were all still very deeply connected, but most of my time was spent on my dad's side of the family. And my grandmother pretty much raised me. And my grandmother was not accepting of the fact that I was a gay child. And it was very difficult. And later in the years, as I got older, I learned that my mother also did not accept me being a lesbian. So it was very difficult, very challenging growing up. And I know what it's like to just exist, but people around you are constantly battling with you, with who you are. And it's very conflicting. It's very troubling, because you have to remember you're going through the developmental stages. You're trying to figure out who you are. And your family are the first people that are in your lives. They're the first people you depend on, the first people who you listen to, who you confide in, who you trust, who you expect to be your support system. But when all goes haywire, and you find out pretty quickly, oh, well, my family doesn't support me because I am a lesbian. Well, things start to shift and change pretty quickly. So you have to kind of readjust. And this is when the lesbian shame begins to unravel, because you realize that you are the one who's different. And we use the word different not in a derogatory sense, but just emphasizing that you stand out from the crowd. And I stood out in the family because I was the only lesbian. And you notice that everybody around you is heterosexual. The people who you love and the people who pretty much teach you about life usually are your family, your immediate family members. And then it extends into your extended family members, such as your aunts and your female cousins, for example. And I'm saying the women of the family because, you know, you're a girl, you're a female, and growing up, you are deeply affected by the women in your family. So you want to be loved by your family, you want to be appreciated, and you want to be accepted. Those are just natural desires. We always have a innate desire to belong. And when that is shattered, when that is broken, lesbian shame is usually occurring in your life. Now, every lesbian is different. Your experience is not going to look like the next lady or girl who is a lesbian, but you may have similarities. For example, like I explained to you briefly about my background, you probably weren't raised by your dad or your grandmother. You probably had a different situation, but it all comes to the fact that we are still lesbians and we all grew up in an environment. And we all may have experienced lesbian shame. Now, there are some lesbians who may have never experienced lesbian shame because although we are lesbians, we are not monolithic. There are some lesbians who come from family upbringings who are extremely supportive and loving of their same-sex attracted children. And that actually is wonderful because your self-esteem is already boosted. You're more confident in who you are. You probably have more opportunities to explore yourself. And as you mature, you get to explore your sexual identity. And you don't feel any shame about it. You have freedom of self-expression. But if you come from an upbringing like myself, where I wasn't free to be myself, well, you experience lesbian shame. Now, for me, I personally didn't have an issue with being a lesbian at all. And I recognized that I was a lesbian at a very young age, like before the age of 10 years old. So I knew I was a lesbian before I even knew or understood what the word lesbian meant, because it's very instinctive. It's innate. Your sexual orientation is very organic. Nobody can teach you who to be attracted to. And my family, did not accept me being a lesbian. So it was extremely challenging for me to grow up, especially coming from a African American or Black family. Being homosexual was not celebrated. It was not acknowledged. It was pretty much non-existent. The only time that people brought up the subject of homosexuality was usually in the church sector, and it was very defamed. Being a gay or lesbian person was frowned upon. It was not anything that anyone wanted to be. But people were still gay. People were still lesbian. I mean, you're going to be yourself because it's who you are. But even though you are a female homosexual and you identify as lesbian or gay, however you prefer to use the word, you experienced shame for being a female homosexual. And the reason why you experienced this atrocity is because as a Black young girl, as a Black teenager, as a Black young adult woman, history has shown us that we have come from very deprived and detrimental circumstances. Black people are very profound and strong people, very creative people. But because of the history of slavery, slavery didn't happen that long ago. Like, slavery was abolished in the year of 1865. That wasn't that long ago. So our people were enslaved against their will for hundreds of years. And then after slavery was abolished, you were just willy-nilly out here without any protection, without any justice. Nobody wanted you around except for to use you and destroy you. You can't imagine the mental breakdown, the psychological humiliation and degradation that Black people experience. So you can't expect for Black people to just have it all together and just be perfect when they weren't even allowed to have family. So Black people are very big on the Black family unit. And you go into the 1960s and then you start going through the civil rights era. So this was when Black people were able to now have civil rights. They were free after slavery, but they had no civil rights. So now you begin with civil rights. That was 1965. People, that hasn't even been 100 years. At the recording of this video, it's 2025. So we know people, probably even in our family, who were living in 1965. So you see how close that is? So Black families have gone through quite a bit. And being gay or being lesbian is viewed as something evil, something demonic. And even, quite frankly, a lot of Black people think that being gay or being homosexual does not originate with Black people or African people. That's how they believe. But it's not true. If you study African and Black history, you will learn that there were an enormous amount of people who were homosexual. Even if the word lesbian or gay didn't exist then, there were homosexual people. There always was homosexual people. But what I'm trying to explain is that you can forget. And Black people, they were oppressed. They were beaten. They had no rights. They were sexually abused. It was so much that Black people went through. They couldn't have their families. It was discrimination and prejudice after slavery. Discrimination and prejudice you still experience today. But people may not have the knowledge. They may forget about their history, because when you go through something as severe as slavery, and then just Jim Crow laws and discrimination and racism and prejudice and hardship and pain, you go through all that, and if you're not educated, because they don't want you to be smart, they want you to be ignorant, but not only ignorant, they want you to be stupid. So you just don't know. So a lot of Black people just didn't know how to deal with somebody that they're related to and they're a homosexual. Now, I'm not giving Black people or any people an excuse for their lack of empathy and their lack of knowledge and understanding about homosexuality, because at the end of the day, most heterosexual people are very self-centered. They only think about themselves. And since the majority of the world is heterosexual, well, why should they concern themselves about gays and lesbians or the LGBTQIA plus community? In most cases, they don't even think about us. And I'm just being honest. I'm just giving you the harsh truth. So when you come from that type of family, well, you kind of face a lot of difficulties and things can be very confusing. And the reason why there's so much drama going on is because the people in your household are causing the drama. They're making you out to be a problem. And you'll hear things like name calling you. There's a lot of derogatory names that they have for lesbians. And you hear those words, and even the word lesbian is a word that is used against you. I have a video that I did on my YouTube channel a while back, and it's called, the title of the video is "Lesbian is Not a Bad Word." And I learned to embrace the word lesbian because I was actually taught to be ashamed to consider myself a lesbian. Like, I remember just hearing, for example, my grandma saying things like, you ought to be ashamed of being a lesbian. You know, just things of that nature. You know, it was just hearing things, being exposed to things that I shouldn't have when I was young. Because pretty much people will influence you to dislike yourself or be ashamed of who you are or to feel insecurity. It can get so bad where you can not even love yourself because of how people treat you. And that's why it's so important that you have the ability to be around other people and be in different environments that are not like the ones you grew up in, where they're very bigoted and prejudiced and homophobic and biphobic and transphobic. You have to get out of those environments. But what if you can't? Like, maybe you're too young, or maybe you don't make enough money to move away. You're just there. I get it. I had to go through all that. I couldn't just leave. And sometimes we get so used to the environment that we're in, we think that this is the way it is everywhere, right? And in a sense, it is, but at the same time, it's not. Like, when you start going to school, when you go to church, when you go to work, you're going to run into people who do jokes and tease, and they're not kind to people who are same-sex attracted people. So you start saying, oh, okay, so these people, they don't like gays at all. So yes, it's out there outside of your family, but sometimes because you're so used to the way you've been mistreated over the years, you subconsciously attract the same kind of people wherever you go. because you think that this is the way it's supposed to be. You don't know what it's like to be around someone who actually thinks that you being a lesbian is a beautiful quality. And if you were around someone like that, it would shock you. You might feel a little bit uncomfortable, or you might think they're playing some kind of sick joke on you and they're going to come out and just let you know how homophobic they are. And it's only because we are a product of our environment. And the lesbian shame will stay with you until you break away from it. I even did a video on my YouTube channel, and it's titled Lesbian Bed Death. And I discuss some deep topics about why lesbian bed death happens. And a lot of the lesbian shame that we go through as lesbians or gay women or gay children, it is programmed. This is not something that we're actually feeling ourselves internally. And what I mean by that is you were fine. You were good with who you are. You didn't know that something was wrong until somebody told you that something was wrong. And then you start wondering, well, what's wrong? What did I do? What's the problem? What's going on here? And just going back, to when I mentioned that usually it starts in the home. Maybe it was your mother, maybe it was your grandmother, maybe it was your sister, maybe it was your aunt, maybe it was your female cousins, maybe your female friends. Somebody brought to your attention that your attraction for girls is very unpleasant, and they made you feel very bad about it. And here's the culprit of this. We live in a heteronormative society, so more than likely all of these women who you are around are heterosexual. So they think like heterosexual women, and they want you to be heterosexual. And yes, your family, even though they don't like the fact that you are a lesbian, they still care about you. They still love you, but they just don't know how to love you unconditionally. They don't know. And in most cases, they won't even take the time to try to learn who you are, to understand you. They're so busy with trying to change you. I always say I was deterred from being who I was because I wasn't allowed to be myself. I personally said, you know what? I can't do this forever. I can't be around these people. Even though they're my family, I love them, I got to get away from here. And my escape was going off to college. Like when I went off to college, that's when I realized, oh, so not everybody has a problem with me being a lesbian. Because as I said, you get so used to being around an environment that you think it's like that everywhere. Now, there are some situations that you may run into some people and you're like, okay, so she's gay, but she seems very confident in who she is. Like I remember being as early as I can remember being in middle school and high school. Like I used to play volleyball, and I briefly played basketball, but I didn't want to play basketball. My dad wanted me to play it, and I just played it for him, and then I got out of it because I didn't really like it. I really wanted to run track, but I do enjoy athletics and sports, although I'm not an athlete. I guess you can say I just played sports, but I never thought about playing professional sports. But I remember being around other young ladies who were actually gay. They were lesbians, and they played basketball. Majority of them played basketball. And many of them were just themselves. They were very confident, like they were out. Now, back then, you didn't really walk around and say, hey, I'm a lesbian. It was just kind of like it was understood. You would see a young girl have a girlfriend. And that's what it was. You knew it without talking about it. And I remember thinking to myself, I was very curious to know more about being myself without feeling like somebody was watching me and somebody was going to call me out and embarrass me and shame me. I wasn't able to be myself, even though I did not have an issue with myself. I just knew that there was nobody around who was like me. So my first experiences of being around other women who were like me was in school. And fortunately, I played sports. So I was able to be around other women who were like me. But we didn't have those discussions or conversations though, because even though these young ladies were being themselves, there was still this unspoken knowing that you don't talk about being gay or lesbian out in public because there are people around you who are going to shame you. But you still did what you wanted to do. You still had your girlfriend. You still were yourself. But when you left school, you went back to blending in with the family. You didn't talk about what happened at school. You didn't talk about a girl that you are attracted to, a girl that you were with. You didn't do that because you understood. It was just understood. You just can't have that conversation. And that's all lesbian shame. It's not because you are ashamed of yourself, but the environment that you are in creates the toxicity of lesbian shame. So a great way to protect yourself and work through those unfortunate circumstances and toxic environments of lesbian shame, I encourage you now, like when I was growing up, there was no internet. We were still playing outside. We still knew what it was like to not experience cell phones. You were more people oriented. You were always talking to people, and like word of mouth, people talk, people gossip, things spread. You dealt with a lot of that. But it's a bit different now with us being in the technology era. This is actually the informational era that we're living in, and it's very good. You can take advantage of any time or era that you're in. And I would say that learn about yourself as a lesbian. I used to read books. I used to watch movies. I would look at documentaries. I would go to events where I knew there were lesbians. I would go out of my way to do so. But now you have so much more opportunity to do it because you can just pull out your smartphone and just Google. Pull out your laptop, your MacBook, your computer, whatever you have, and Google what's happening. And you can learn about lesbians more. And this is one of the big reasons why I started my YouTube channel. I am a certified life coach and I do coach same-sex attracted people, but my life coaching extends to people who actually have lesbian children, gay children. Like there's parents who hire me for life coaching because they need guidance on how to be a good parent to their gay or lesbian child. I have lesbian, gay, LGBTQI people who hire me. They're actually gay, they're parents, and they have children. And they may have children who are gay as well. And they just want to be a good support system. So me being a life coach gives me the opportunity to be available for you. And I think that is a wonderful benefit. And with technology, I can bring it to the internet by having my own website. My website is gisellewallace.com. I also am the founder and creator of my own school. It is a online private academy, and it's called Giselle Wallace Lesbian Academy. It is where I provide courses and lessons and classes for lesbians. There will be content exclusively for lesbians only because it's information that is for lesbians exclusively. But Giselle Wallace Lesbian Academy collectively serves the LGBTQIA plus community, where I say that we learn our way in a heteronormative society. And it is for a mature audience, and it is a paywall. There is a fee to enroll in the courses. And in the near future, I will be creating memberships. So stay tuned for that. To stay posted, please subscribe here to my YouTube channel, because I will be giving announcements about upcoming projects. And I want you to be there and be a part of what I have going on for us. So take advantage of the technology that's there. Don't just know that it exists, but you don't do anything about it. Get involved. I've always been the kind of person who got involved. I was very proactive about who I am. I wanted to learn about myself. I have written articles. I have a journalistic background. My Bachelor of Science degree is in journalism. I've written articles, newsletters about the lesbian experience. I'm an author. This is actually one of my books now. It's titled Lesbian Erasure, How to Cope, Black Lesbian Edition. It is available on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes and Nobles, as well as Apple iBooks and many other store outlets. I encourage you to order the book Lesbian Erasure, How to Cope, Black Lesbian Edition, because we have to learn how to cope in a world that generates lesbian shame. Lesbian shame, unfortunately, is a dynamic that we've been exposed to, and many people continue to be exposed to. And it also becomes a norm where people don't see a problem with it, just like they don't see lesbian erasure as a problem. People contribute to the issue of lesbian erasure and lesbian shame because they want you to be like them. I call it heterosexual programming, and it takes a lot to deprogram from all of that. You probably have incidents where you go through lesbian shame, even though you're out open lesbian or gay woman or teenager, and you're confident in your own skin. You probably run into some situations where you feel like you got to hide yourself, or somebody makes you feel bad about you saying that you're a lesbian. And even when you're in a relationship, you're a lesbian, you're in a same-sex attracted relationship with another woman, you have to take on another woman in your life, and although you both are lesbians, she had a completely upbringing from you. So you're bringing all that together, and you got to deal with that and work through that as a couple. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of fortitude to be a lesbian. It is not for the faint of heart. And people who dismiss us as lesbians and they don't take our relationships between women seriously, all of that is a lesbian erasure. All of that is cultivated in lesbian shame, because they don't think that we will benefit from being who we are. But we always thrive as lesbians. We always shine as lesbians when we know who we are and we are being our authentic self. So I encourage you, get involved. If you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, thank you. I appreciate you for being here, and make sure you subscribe. I also appreciate your support on my YouTube channel. There is a thanks and a super thanks button. Like whenever you see a short or video of mine, you can donate to the YouTube channel, and the contributions support my business as a lesbian. We should contribute to the businesses of lesbian women, and also lesbian, gay, bisexual, LGBTQIA plus people who are in business, because we can help ourselves as a community, and it extends not just within our community, but to everyone else. It actually impacts us in a wonderful way. So I hope that this message resonates with you on the topic of lesbian shame. I am Giselle Wallace, certified lesbian life coach and author. Thank you for listening, and be you. Love yourself and have no shame. You have nothing to be shamed about as a lesbian or same-sex attracted person.